and all kinds of stuff. Yeah, sure.
One thing I will say is weird is I watched a couple documentaries of people walking through Pluckley Woods at night.
Documentaries?
They are technically documentaries.
Documentaries, or is it ghost/spook/haunted hunters/finders/investigators TV show?
No, mostly just like people with like cameras going.
Okay, so not the guys with the reality crew following them.
I mean, I watched the one, right?
Oh, I tried to watch a bunch of them.
I watched the Ghost Hunters International, and then I just watched a bunch of footage that people, individuals, had just uploaded. And I will
YouTube
say,
YouTube kind of stuff?
Yeah, YouTube stuff. And I will say, one thing I did notice about Pluckley is it does seem like the birds sing really late there. Like, birds don't usually sing in the middle of the night.
No, that's kind of weird.
But there are birds singing in the middle of the night, so I don't really know what's going on there.
Oh, that could have been.
Seems weird.
It could have been they did it shot in the afternoon, but they didn't know how to use their camera.
That's possible.
Yeah, people you can easily manipulate.
Yeah.
Your video
to make it look like it's super creepy and dark.
I mean, how many TV shows have we watched where they're out at night, but you can tell it's daylight, but they've turned the blue up really high? It's very obvious what's going on.
Oh yeah.
So I will say that's a bit odd. It's just the consistency with which that happens is kind of odd, but I don't think there's anything paranormal about birds singing in the middle of the night necessarily.
Yeah.
One
phenomenon that I want to talk about a little bit is the phenomenon of people shooting video while holding their camera vertical instead of in portrait mode instead of in landscape mode.
I think that's an entire different episode.
It is, but I just want to talk about how annoying I find that.
Yeah. No, I think that's an episode in and of itself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so be forewarned. Next week we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
Listen, I have friends who were confused. Landscape back to portrait while shooting a continuous video with their phone, and it didn't auto-rotate when they played it back.
Oh, really?
People, it's mind-boggling to some.
Oh, yeah. That is mind-boggling.
It is.
Yeah.
So do you want to, is there anything more? Do you want to talk about the woods?
Oh, well, no, I'm done with these woods.
The woods are, I know they've been talked about. They talked about other stands of woods that have been chopped down, but the screaming woods are still there, correct?
Yes.
Okay, good.
So I have a question about the woods.
Okay.
That I didn't think to ask at the time when we were doing the interview.
Okay.
And I didn't really see it anywhere in my reading before the modern era. At what frequency were these screams heard in the woods? Was this an hourly, a nightly, a monthly, or a yearly?
I think it's an occasional kind of thing.
Okay, which that's why I wanted to know. Devin, are you
That's my understanding as
okay,
well.
I kind of had the same idea, which is why I'm inclined to, though Devin always says it's foxes, this time to agree that it's foxes.
It is.
Yeah, I think that if it was happening like every day, I think the locals would have cut the woods down a long time ago.
For sure.
Yeah.
They would have, yeah.
Or burned them.
Yeah. Probably more, burned them.
Yeah.
Okay.
With pitchforks.
So then the last one is ghosts.
Yeah. Yeah, we got all these ghosts. We got the carriage. I like the carriage.
Yeah.
The carriage is cool.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I'd like to see that sometime.
That would be damn creepy to run across that one.
For sure, yeah. Or a highwayman. I mean, anything that's out of place that you just see is kind of like, what? But it's creepy. It's weird.
The colonel, I'm not so sure about. I don't know how you recognize that he was a colonel or not.
I don't know how you
that
would
one either.
Explain who the colonel is again.
The colonel was the one that hung himself, right? That was after World War.
Oh, in the woods?
Yeah, hung himself in the woods.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't have a good theory for what the ghosts could be, except one.
Okay.
But it's not going to make a lot of people happy.
What's that?
There's two theories. Actually, I guess I should be
Two
fair.
answers.
Well, there's two answers. I mean, there is a possibility that they are real, and that's the end of that theory, right? If they're real, then they're real. There needs no explanation. But if they're not real, why aren't they real? And one is actually, Chris talked about this a little bit, and we're just going to play a really quick clip of his in a minute. But it could all be a Victorian lie.
Yeah.
So let's listen to Chris talk about this for a second, and then we can keep talking about it.
But the interesting thing in regards to the Victorian Society was it was around that time when they had a train station built in the village. And not every village has a train station. I mean, that's quite rare, as it goes for villages in Kent. And this train station was connected to London. So there is this idea that Victorian society within the newspaper newspapers and periodicals at the time picked up on this local legend, picked up on the different things that were happening, kind of like sensationalized a lot of stuff in the Victorian era. And then that sort of intrigued visitors to come down from London, and they could just come straight down on the train. So it kind of seems that there's an explosion in a lot of this stuff around that time. Well, you know, it might be a Scooby-Doo conspiracy. You know, I would have got away with it if it weren't for them damn meddling kids.
Exactly.
But if you look at the Deering's, if you look at the Deering the Deering's, when there was a census done, there were so many different sort of trades and stores and outlets and things within the village trying to make a living. I mean, no less the watercress lady, for heaven's sakes. So there may have been a village conspiracy with all these people selling and making stuff to bring wealthy Londoners down, you know.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's pretty solid.
My problem with this is that it's easy to say that that's what they were doing because that was what their obsession was, but I feel like some of this was happening before, and I'll be very honest, as usual, I don't believe in this. I think that there's a lot of very simple answers going on. And I mean, because if this place was such a thin spot, such a magnet for people who died under bad circumstances to materialize again or show back up as a ghost, why? Well, I mean, what makes it such a special place? It's like that one we talked. Gosh, this was way back in the beginning, the dog bridge.
Yeah.
The bridge where the dog, like, people said, well, that was a thin spot, but yet nobody ever says what makes these things what they are. It's just, oh, well, I don't know, it must be a thin spot.
Well, but, you know, we don't understand that stuff, so hey, who's to say it is, say it's not.
I mean,
hey.
didn't you watch Fringe?
Yes.
There was no real explanation for why there were those certain thin spots.
But thin spots is a total made-up term. I mean, it's like somebody said, there's a bunch of stuff going on here. I don't know why. I'm just going to say it's a thin spot, and we all follow that. Like, it just...
I think a thin spot is a term for... It's like a placeholder term, right? Because I think there are a lot of people who are genuinely trying to do scientific research into paranormal stuff. Right? And we obviously don't understand, like, nobody knows what happens after death. Nobody knows if ghosts are real, like genuinely 100% knows, right? There are people who believe deeply, but because we don't know, we don't have good evidence to back that up, we don't know what a thin spot might be, right? So I think it's that kind of placeholder term where it's like, it's what we are referring to as a thin spot until we can figure out what it is, because they don't know.
It could be.
And I know that, like, skeeves you out. Like, you hate it when somebody says, like, here's an explanation, but I don't know why. But it's a similar thing with, you know, before quantum physics was really kind of expanded.
Let's see. Let's look at it this way, too. It could be that the actual concentration of ghosts, assuming that they're real, which I'm not coming down on one side or the other of, it could be the concentration of the number of ghosts in Pluckley are actually no greater than anywhere else. But it could be because, let's not forget, people have been living in the same village for centuries. So pretty much most of the people in that village share a lot of genes. And so there might be, if you're a certain person who's a receiver, which is that you can receive thoughts from other people, you'll probably be more likely to see ghosts also.
Alternately, since it is such a close-knit group of people and there's a smaller community, people may be more likely to actually talk about and believe the people who are talking about their experiences, right? I mean, if you living in Portland,
it's not a cultural taboo anymore.
Well,
to
yeah,
talk about these things.
I mean, it's not
see.
even just a taboo. Like, okay, so I guess to frame it, like, we live in Portland. It's not like huge, but it's not tiny, right? And you go and you sit down at a bar, and there's this guy that you don't really know, and he starts talking about ghosts, right? Versus you live in a place, you know everybody, you know most of the people, you have a respect for them and their intelligence, you've known them their whole life, and they start telling you about how they saw a ghost. You're probably going to give it at least a little bit more pause. There's going to be a little bit more credit there than some random, like, Joe off the street. Joe.
Well,
random dude off the street.
No, that's true. I mean, if because I know people, I know like at least one person that I know who used to work in a bar that I used to frequent, who said there was a ghost there, and other people said there was a ghost there. And she told me a couple of stories that were truly kind of hinky. Although I can think of an explanation or two for them, but they were still kind of creepy as hell.
And that's my problem with this is I feel like somebody told the story once, and
Yeah.
other people are retelling the story in their own version because something that they noticed after the fact made them think that that thing wasn't there before and now it's there. But I mean, one of those silly ghost finder, ghost facer shows that I was watching, the guy was in this place and he's talking into the camera, and this is how I feel about most people who say they have the encounters, because I don't find it to be genuine. I'm not saying that people are lying. This guy I do. I watched him and he's talking into the camera, and then he does this really dramatic pause, and he points. Oh my gosh, did you see it? It was there. And he runs over and he's giving this such a deadpan, trying to sound sincere. I saw this thing happen here. And from the accountings that I've read, like the thing that he described wasn't in any of the lore, so he was literally making guano up on the spot.
Where was this at?
It was in Pluckley. It was in one of the churches. And so that's why I have such a difficulty, because you watch these things, you're like, it seems very clear that this is being made up for entertainment, and I feel like a lot of the times the entertainment value has gained so much steam, but has gone on so long that the joke and the gag stopped 200 years ago.
That's fair.
And everybody else is just telling the same thing, thinking that it was meant to be real.
Well, I don't
fair.
think that probably Pluckley did not have until fairly recently a more than its fair share of ghost stories, because every place you go to, somebody will say, "Oh yeah, there's a ghost,"
Ghost here, yeah.
and not necessarily taking it too seriously. But then there was a BBC personality named Desmond Carrington, you guys may have heard of.
Yeah.
Who did both radio and TV for the BBC, and apparently he was like being interviewed for an article for the TV Times, which is kind of like their version of the TV Guide, sometime in the 1950s, and he was he's from Kent. And I don't know how the topic came up, but he decided to, Pluckley already had a ghost story or two, and he decided to just make up a bunch more on this, and just basically that's what he did. He made up a lot of these characters on the spot, and that's one way they might have made their way sort of into the popular consciousness.
So they weren't in the
Totally.
written record before that?
Yeah, they were not. I don't think there was much of a written record, really, of Pluckley's ghosts. There were sort of vague fireside
Oral
tales.
tradition.
You know,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. Somebody else wrote a book, a guy named Francis Sanders in 1955 published a book called Pluckley Was My Playground, which I think sold about 2 copies. And I mean, I don't know how many people are really interested in hearing about somebody's childhood in Pluckley. I know I'm not. But apparently he recounted some of these stories too. But I looked for a copy online of Pluckley Was My Playground. Couldn't find one.
Find it.
So
Yeah.
I was not able to find out exactly how many ghosts he talked about.
Yeah.
That's about it.
I mean, I think it's an interesting story. I don't know. I don't know really where I fall.
Urban
I
legend.
feel like I fall more in the believing camp than Steve, for sure. Like all the time.
Oh yeah, I am holding down the entire camp on this other side.
Yeah, but I also am not willing to totally discredit what people say they've said and experienced. So I think it's an interesting one. I think it's worth a stop on our trip over to the UK sometime in the future.
Yeah.
In 5 years.
No, it'll be sooner than that, I'm sure.
Actually, I just saw some great airfare rates.
Okay.
Yeah, let's go.
Great.
Yeah, we'll go in the off season.
So, do you guys have anything else you want to contribute to this?
I think I've probably said my piece and more.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, enough said.
Jeez, Steve.
Okay.
So
Steve's the worst.
one last little thing. Chris has a podcast. Actually, there's 2 podcasts, and they are relevant to your interests. So we're gonna let him tell you about them real quick.
So I co-host the podcast Scare Zone, which can be found at scarezone.com. It's a podcast about Halloween Horror Nights, which is a Halloween-themed event that happens at Universal Studios in Orlando, Florida, and in Hollywood, California. I also write about that and do a lot of the history behind Universal Studios. You can look me up on Amazon. It's Christopher Ripley. I've got 5 books at the moment.
Now we're gonna wrap up. So
Sweet.
if you live in if you are a ghost that
Yeah,
lives
of
in
course.
Pluckley and you want to tell us your story
And are able to operate a computer
and
or a mobile device.
or something, or you
Yeah.
can just think it really hard at us, I guess. I don't know.
You could actually just come over here and pay us a visit, but if you're an angry ghost, go
Don't do
visit,
that, please.
Visit Devin, not me.
No, visit Steve.
Oh, that
He's
sounds
I'm not
fair.
going to understand their accent.
That's okay.
Yeah, me neither.
You can communicate to us via our email address. That email address is thinkingsidewayspodcast@gmail.com. If you want to see some of the links to some of the research we did, you can find that online on our website, which is thinkingsidewayspodcast.com. On that, you can also find links to our merch stores. If you won't. And also on the sidebar, there's an episode list, which is a fully inclusive list of every single episode that we have done, every 200 plus episodes that we've done.
Okay, so if you're wondering, if you're thinking that you might write to us to suggest something, hey, maybe we've already done it.
Yeah, it's possible.
Yeah, that's the best place to go.
It
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
I actually use it all the time when people suggest stories.
Yeah. Although I will
Yeah.
say, hopping over, we do have a Facebook, and on the group, one of our mods did a really cool thing and put a note that also was an all-inclusive list of our episodes. So you can find that there. We've got a group and a page, so you can like the page and follow the group. Right? That's how that
Join
works.
the group.
Join the group. Yeah.
Something like that.
Do those two things.
Like them all. Yeah.
You can find us on Twitter. We're Thinkin' Sideways. We've got a subreddit as well for those of you who are Redditors, and that is just Thinking Sideways. All that having been said, I think I'm just gonna, poof on out of here.
There's like ghost times.
I've been spirited away.
I'm just going to say bye.
Bye, guys.
Boom. Hey guys, Steve here. You are listening to one of our original 26 episodes. If you've listened to any of our new episodes, you're gonna notice that we're sounding a little different in these ones.
Yeah, there's a reason for that.
There is.
They've been remastered
They have been remastered.
because they had a really annoying hum.
Yeah, I mean, a huge thanks to listener James for doing almost all of the legwork on this
Yes.
thing.
Yeah.
You'll also notice if you had listened to what we're calling the Lost 26 episodes before, and you're re-listening now, the music and sound effects are gone.
Yes, we've gone back to straight audio. So be warned, we sound a little different today than we do in what you're about to listen to.
Yeah.
Enjoy.
Uh-huh.
Bye.
Okay, bye.
Thinking Sideways.
I don't understand.
Does not compute.
You never know.
Insufficient data to formulate a reply.
Stories of things we simply don't know the answer to.
Well, hey there, and thanks for joining us again. This is Thinking Sideways, the podcast, and I am Steve, as always, joined by
Joe.
And Devin.
And this week we're going to take on yet another thing that I don't quite understand.
Yeah.
Well, this one I don't quite understand because, well, ladies and gentlemen, we haven't quite gone to this territory before, but we're going to do it anyway, is what a lot of people believe to be an urban myth.
Yeah.
And it's hard
Most
with-
of what we talk about.
Well, this one, and we'll get into the details of it in the name of, but when you get into a lot of things on the net, it seems like you find a pretty solid opinion one way or the other. It's, oh, that's real, or oh no, total urban myth. Even Snopes on this one has said, oh no, this is a total urban myth. Except my problem is as I read it, I thought that, and then I came across some details. It started making me think that maybe there's some gems of truth in it. So, what the heck? We're going to run down that road.
I'm really
Yeah,
excited.
okay.
This is like opening up new territory for us. This
It
is
is.
like nothing like we've done yet. No,
Boldly going where no show has gone before.
well,
Yeah.
maybe some shows, but our
This show has gone before.
Yeah,
Yeah.
not any show that I've ever listened to. So, that's the main thing.
So no show ever.
So no show has ever done this before.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, tonight we're going to talk about Polybius. If you
Wait, like the Greek philosopher?
No.
Oh.
No, not that guy.
Oh.
Polybius, which is supposedly a arcade game that came out in 1981.
Oh.
So we're going to step into a little time machine here because not everybody understands this, and we're going to go back to 1981. And when you played a video game, you had to go to an arcade because they were the stand-up machines. Pinball and stand-up arcade games. There was almost no home video games.
1981, hardly anybody had a home computer.
Well, and Atari had... I don't even know that the Atari gaming system had come out. If it had, it was still in its infancy.
They were really expensive.
They were very expensive.
And to hook it up to your TV, to have a TV that was compatible with something like that, also crazy expensive.
Correct, because old tube TVs did not have a bazillion ports on the back.
Well, and they weren't digital, so you had to get a demodulator and a modulator, whatever. You could actually interface those things, but you had to buy this box to do it with.
Right. So some had it, some didn't.
And it was kind of fuzzy and crappy looking too.
Yeah, so it wasn't easy to do. Playing video games meant you had a roll of quarters in your pocket, and you went down to the arcade.
Mm-hmm.
That's just how it happened. I remember many a time begging money off of my parents. Can I have a couple of bucks so I can go play video games? Yeah, go. I mean, that's just the way it was. So we're going to talk about Polybius. And let's go ahead. The story, because it's considered an urban legend or an urban myth, there are a lot of variants and versions of it out there, and I'm going to do my best to try and wade through those, but let's just get the basic story to start with.
Yeah.
And then we'll build from there.
Okay.
All right. So, according to this story, an unnamed arcade here in Portland, Oregon, in 1981 got a new game, Polybius.
So was it one or was it several? I heard it was several.
Well, you just right off the bat. I've heard both ways. I've heard it was one arcade. I've heard it was multiple arcades in this city. I've heard that they were all in the suburbs, and I've heard that there was a couple that showed up in other towns on the other side of the country.
Yeah, and we should, make a point of saying it was like an unknown game, but that was really rare. I mean, if you were going to get a new arcade game, you were telling everybody about it. You were saying, oh, yeah, we're finally going to get this, and you wanted to build hype around it.
Yeah, but I also got the impression that this might have been a beta test situation.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If they only build a certain number of game cabinets, then that would explain, we've just got to try it out and see how it does, and then we'll take it back to the shop and make our changes, and then do our big marketing dump.
Probably not a bad idea to just stick some out there and see if people like them or not.
I guess. I just feel like, even at that, in beta testing, you, as an arcade, kind of say, oh, we're getting this beta. The amount of people that would come out for this thing, you say, this is one of 4 units in existence. Come play this game before anybody else. So to have it just kind of appear mysteriously is like the first little question mark, right?
Yeah, exactly. So let's keep going here. It turns out this game was super popular and from many accounts, almost addictive. People were lining up, playing it like mad nonstop. In at least one arcade, according to these accounts of it being released, the owner of that arcade said that he noticed, and I'm using air quotes, men in black hanging around. Watching the players, watching their reactions, going to the machines, not collecting money, but doing something on the inside of the machine, and then walking away. Which is weird.
Well, and I got to say, I really have a hard time believing that because, are you really going to send some guys with pork pie hats and black suits and skinny ties to an arcade full of teenagers and young people? Come on. Of course, this is the government, so maybe, but still.
I think throughout history, you get these reports. A lot of conspiracy theories or urban legends have these mysterious men in black characters, and I think that it's often used as a term, not as an actual description of these people.
So it's possible, that these guys were actually casually dressed.
Yeah, it could be that they weren't in jeans and ratty T-shirts and 18.
Yeah,
they just
were
look
adults.
They look like 35-year-old FBI agents in sweatshirts.
Right. Yeah. I picture the Steve Buscemi as a teenager in an episode where Steve Buscemi plays a personal investigator, private eye. And he says something about, he was doing an undercover thing in high school, and it just shows him in a high school, literally just Steve Buscemi, but wearing kids' clothes with a skateboard. He's like, hey, dudes and dudettes, what are we doing tonight? So I feel like that's like also totally feasible. Men in Black, right? It's just like dudes who are like, oh no, we're 13.
Yeah, I know.
Clearly in their 30s.
Yes.
Yeah.
No. I shaved my hair this high up on my forehead.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. I got.
No, I dye it gray, man. It's cool.
Yeah,
All right.
but it could have been not necessarily the Men in Black, but just men from the corporation that built these things.
Yeah, I
just
mean,
wanted to see what.
They could be
what
some kind of businessman of some kind. I mean,
Yeah.
again, this is as with this, it's rife with possibilities for plausible reasons or implausible ones.
Yeah, if you've built these machines and you've got them out there for testing purposes to see how people like them, it makes sense to go by the arcade and just see what people are doing.
Yeah.
You know?
Easy.
Absolutely. So this is where things go a little sideways. No pun intended for this particular show. So evidently, according to the allegations in the multiple versions that you've come across, the machines were having psychoactive effects on players. So they were having amnesia, insomnia, night terrors, suicidal tendencies, like all this crazy behavior.
I feel like it should also be mentioned that in every account that happens, right? That's consistent throughout almost every account.
It is, except here's why I don't put a lot of credence in it's in every account, because the order of those things written out is always identical. It's A, B, C, D.
You think there's a little cutting and pasting going on there?
Cut and paste going on.
Yeah, there seems to be a lot of that on the internet.
But here's...
But I again, and this is one of the things that makes me scratch my head, is how did they find out that these people suffered from, say, amnesia?
That's a very good question.
You know,
Dude, I don't know where I am. Where am I? Well, I'm missing $10 in quarters. Where? I don't know.
Yeah.
It's,
The crowd pulls the kid away, right? Because they're like, they all want to play the game too. It's finally he's died like a million times in a row, and he like wakes up from a trance and it like can't remember doing it. That's, quantifiable and reportable as amnesia, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely possible.
Yeah,
Although,
I suppose.
insomnia.
The insomnia again is a kind of a tricky one.
Yeah.
Unless they did interviews with these kids.
I assume that these are all just like accounts, right? Like
Correct.
kids being like, I couldn't sleep last night. That game is messing me up, or whatever.
Absolutely correct.
Yeah.
So here's where things really go bad. Is according to the story, the game was pulled out of the arcades within weeks of having been installed because one player, it's supposedly a boy, had an epileptic seizure from playing the game.
Yikes.
Which might not even be related to the game. I mean, maybe he was just...
And we'll get into some descriptions of what happens on screen as to why it could have caused a seizure. But it's believed that basically he had a seizure and whoever made the game just in a panic pulled it and it disappeared. And
so, yeah,
it's gone. There's never been a cabinet, physically inspected and people like, look, right here, this is Polybius. We've got it. There's some photos on the net. Again, we're going to get into some of that stuff, but the story itself is really the main basis that we've got to operate from.
Yeah. But yeah, no, that's one of the reasons I'm kind of doubting this story.
Right off the bat.
Because the people that made this thing, I mean, somebody would have held on to it as a souvenir or whatever, or maybe all of it. One of those machines should have showed up on eBay by now. Don't you think?
Well, if there were like 7, right? I mean, you assume if you have decided as a game manufacturer, no, we're pulling this for good, right? They made their cabinets, but the cabinets all kind of look the same. And if they are making other games, they either repurpose it or just
slap
destroy
another set of stickers on it and put a new motherboard in it, and away you go.
Yeah,
because I think that saves a lot of money, honestly.
Oh, yeah, I mean, it would, but, and I'm assuming if these were prototypes, they were probably in generic boxes. But the thing is, somebody would have saved all the guts, and they would have shown up somewhere. Like one time, for example, I bought an Asteroids machine years ago, and it was this guy who had everything but the box. He had like the power supply and the motherboard and the control board and the monitor and everything except the box, the cabinet. And I bought it from this guy, and I played Asteroids for years on this thing. I built a crude box to put it in. So somebody still has those guts somewhere if the game ever existed.
Maybe. I guess I just think that like if you have a game that causes seizures and maybe a bunch of other stuff, you maybe just destroy it. I mean,
again, you want to recoup your cost, you repurpose it, like you said.
Right.
So it's hard to say. But the original story says that this happened in 1981. The story itself didn't surface until August of 1998. So that's 17 years later?
Yeah.
Suddenly the story just pops up on the internet. The story comes up on a forum, which is coinop.org, which evidently is a big gaming forum. I looked around a little bit on it, but I'm not a forum guy, so I didn't really know what I was doing.
It's a forum, not a repository of any kind.
I'm not positive. It might be. I think that in the reading, like CoinOp got bought by somebody else, and so I think that like the old archives are held. I wasn't clear, and I couldn't get a direct line of sight on.
Well,
what was
and to
going
be
on
fair, the internet in '98 is way different than the internet now.
This is true.
And I think it's likely, right? It may have been a forum, but they're just like really basic forums. But I guess the impression I kind of have is that it's just like a repository of ROMs, basically. You download the game you want to play, and you just play it on your computer.
That's what CoinOp is.
I got the impression that CoinOp was originally basically a BBS.
Just a BBS?
Yeah, an old school BBS. But
Yeah.
Again, I don't know. But here's what happens is this original story comes out. There's almost no information about the history of the game. They just say that it's a space shooter / abstract puzzle game. It's named after a Greek historian. And I mean, honestly, it doesn't lend itself to a whole lot of credibility right off the bat from that. And everybody on the internet from day one has ripped this thing to shreds, and that's continued to happen. I mean, if you do, ladies and gentlemen, if you go out and you search for information on this game, type it into Google, you're going to come up with a gazillion hits on it. And you're going to find people who say it's fake. You're going to find people who say it's real. You're going to find some guy who says he's got it in his mom's basement. I mean, it's everywhere. Okay, well, the forums aside, let's just walk through some of the details that have been put out there. And again, I'm putting air quotes around the word details, but the things that I have found that people say about the game. And we'll start with, how does the game work?
Yeah.
What is the game? Because it's a game. That's kind of the first thing is, what is it?
And there's some conflicting data on that too. Isn't there?
There's data all over the map on every point that I'm going to bring up in here, and that's the hard part. And bear with us, folks, because there are some things that we are hanging on till the end that maybe tie some of this together. But okay, so according to the information that I've come across, the game was either an action puzzle game that had a rotating 3D puzzle that had logic puzzles in it, and it had a maze built in it. Kind of like, do you remember Pac-Man, the original Pac-Man, how you had to run through the maze? That's what they mean by a maze. Not, in these new games where you're first-person shooter going through these crazy mazes where you can only see ahead.
Yeah, I mean, this is 1981, so we're still probably looking at 2D graphics and very simple.
Yes, absolutely simple graphics. The second, B, is that you're flying through a tunnel and you have to dodge things that are in your path. And as you get farther through the game,